Nigeria, there are still many there. There are many. I believe that those people, they said that they are deep.
When you begin to hide yourself
of the business I'm doing, how to keep business, like customer business, you see.
Hello, welcome to Talking Migration on TV 360. I am Oyin Adekunle. Now, as many as 20,000 women and girls are feared to have been trafficked from Nigeria to Mali. The women and girls, mostly aged 16 and 30, had been told they would be taken to Malaysia to work in hospitality, but instead were forced into prostitution. This was disclosed by the Director General of the National Agency for the Prohibition of Trafficking in Persons, that's NAPTIP. Julie Okadonli said the information was uncovered by a fact-finding team from NAPTIP and the International Organization for Migration, that's IOM, during a visit to southern Mali in December 2018. The victims are held in horrible slave-like conditions and they can't escape because they are kept in remote locations like deep in forests. Moving on, the Emir of Qatar, Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani, has issued a decree to provide funding in the sum of $20 million to the evacuation of African migrants from Libya back to their home countries. Al Thani announced the decision after a visit by the chairman of the African Union Commission, that's Musa Faki, to the Qatar capital. The fund, which will be run under the auspices of the African Union, will also cover the cost of reintegrating the migrants after they are returned to their countries. The Italian government has accused France of continuing to exploit Africa with some of its policies, creating poverty and fueling large-scale migration to Europe. Italy's Deputy Prime Minister Luigi Di Maio says France is still treating a number of African countries as vassal states. Maio added that France is manipulating the economies of the 14 African countries that use the CFA franc. He added that if Europe wants to be brave, it must have the courage to confront the issue of decolonization in Africa. Now, the Italy-France dispute is arguably one of the most talked about topics on the global migration scene right now. We shall be addressing the issue and more after this break. Please stay tuned.
On Digi 360, we don't just ask the questions. What is wrong with amending the Constitution the way the National Assembly members have been doing it? We seek answers.
Constitution is constituent.
Our problem is not lack of laws. Our problem is lack of the willpower to implement our laws.
Answers that provide clarity.
While we negotiate, we should try to make it a point that the girls must be complete.
The clarity you need to make informed judgment so that you can make the right decision and take action. People are saying it is you politicians that are responsible for this, that you are the reason why this is happening.
All these dollars that call themselves governors in this country.
I wish we had people like Tony at the National Assembly.
God forbid that I go to join that ballot.
Digi 360, providing clarity to issues.
You're welcome back. Now, joining me on the program to discuss some of the current trends in global migration is Professor Bola Akinterinwa. He is a former Director General at the Nigerian Institute of International Affairs. Thank you very much for your time, Prof.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, sir. So we head straight to it. And let's begin with this dispute between Italy and France, coming at such a time as this. I beg your pardon. Italy accusing France of impoverishing African countries and exploiting their economies. If you ask me, these are very grave allegations. And what do you make of it?
I cannot but agree with you that the allegations are quite grave, especially in light of the fact that Italy and France are on record to have been maintaining very warm relationship over decades, in fact, over centuries. If you go back to the fact that about 400 years, 500 years ago, relationship between the two countries at the diplomatic level have been established. If you look at the fact that Italy and France took active part in the foundation laying of what we normally refer to today as the European Union, one will certainly be surprised, and of course, be most surprised that an allegation of this type will be coming from Italy. Why? This is simply because if you go back to 1957, March 25, when the Rome Treaty establishing the European Economic Community was done. This was done in Rome, in Italy. In other words, Italy and France were two countries out of the 6 that founded the EEC. And if you go back to the Rome Treaty itself, as from Article 131 to Article 136, which refer to the relationship between France and its former colonies, which allowed France to have special relationship with the former colonies in such a way that the umbilical cord tying the former colonies to France was accommodated in the treaty. Then one must be surprised that Italy is now bringing this type of allegation. You know, in 1958, let me say the October 4, 1958 Constitution of France specifically provided for special relationship with the former colonies. And the former colonies established themselves into what was called French community, in which case any one of them is considered assimilated, is naturally another French citizen. So we have the white French and we have the black French, the African French. All these have been accommodated for. Now when we relate this one to your question, how do we relate these manifestations to the allegations? You will now discover that Italy is not denying the fact that there are institutional foundations for France's relationship with the former colonies. But I think that Italy is much angered by the fact that there is this CFA currency. You know, the CFA currency is the currency used in the relationship between France and the French community, basically. In the past, we used to have a special ministry responsible for the management, for the conduct of affairs with the former colonies. It's called Ministère de la Coopération, which is quite different from the Ministère des Affaires étrangères.
Seeking asylum, as far as we know, is a fundamental human right. How is it that it has now become like this, particularly when we look at the issue of standoff, having people stay on the sea and each country saying they are not going to accept those migrants into their country, allowing the ships to dock in their country? What do we make of all these issues in the face of humanitarian crisis?
Yes, I was coming to that aspect. Your question is right, and your observation cannot be more correct. I'm only giving you the foundation for to enable us understand the issues at stake. It's basically a humanitarian issue. What prompted it was that, look, shortly before the accusations were levied last week Wednesday, the issue was that many African migrants had been stranded, you know, many had died. The UN came up with the statistics of about 170 people dying. And what happened was that Italy already looked at this type of situation. Italy is not interested in accommodating, you know, new African migrants. the European Union has a policy that the African migrants coming in, whether legal or illegal, should be distributed on a prorated basis. All right? So as they arrive, they are distributed. The early arrivals were accommodated by Germany in particular. Others, Greece, even Turkey. But the issue now is that France objected, blocked, did not favor, did not cooperate with Italy at a particular time. When some migrants were coming from the southern part of Europe, you know, all these people were going through basically Spain and Italy to enter Europe. So, on the one hand, Italy is not showing any disposition to accommodate them. But the French have engaged in a sermon, preaching the sermon of friendship with them, to accept them. But when the critical problem arose that Italy was asking France to show understanding, France didn't show that. That was what prompted Italy to now say, look, why are you talking about friendship, about kindness to African migrants, when in truth, according to Italy, you are making life difficult? And that was what led Italy to now say, well, look, you are just a colonizer. And at the end of the day, the CFA I was talking about, all right, does not allow many members of the EU to take advantage of that. It is only limited to France. You know, it's a sort of a vertical relationship between France and its former colonies. But the CFA has a provision within the context of the European Treaty. That is the March 25 Rome Treaty establishing the EEC, which later became, we shifted from European Economic Community to European.
I like that you've talked about treating the European Union as one now. You recall that some time ago, the federal government of Nigeria did accuse European countries of fueling the Libya migration crisis, saying that they may be paying Libyan militia to keep Africans in detention camps, more like a situation of, as long as they don't come to our countries, do all you can to keep them there. What do you think of this? Do you think that there may be something of that sort playing out?
No, you see, you need to go back to the genesis of the problem. The issue is that Italy in particular, all right, being a former colonialist too for Libya, now struck an arrangement with the Libyan government that the Libyan government should not allow anybody to use his territory to cross to Europe. And in this case, even when people go through the desert to reach Morocco, all right, the problem was that the arrangement has it that Morocco, for instance, should send them back, and they provided a lot of money in this case. So when you are now talking about putting them in detention camps, particularly in Libya, in Morocco, even from Niger, they pass through Niger as well. They will not allow them to even come near the Mediterranean Sea, not to talk of now sailing to Europe. So the hardship is at that particular level. The problem is at that particular level. So there's an agreement there. The main issue is that Italy, Spain in particular, and France, they do not want to have the inflow of new migrants. We are going to have, for instance, the European Parliament parliamentary elections in May. And the strategic fear now is that, look, more African migrants will come. And they don't want this. This likely explains the attitude of France, which Italy is complaining about. So Nigeria's complaint is quite good. It was perfectly in order. But it couldn't go too far because it is more of an intra-European issue. Let me remind you of Okoye Aripo's foreign policy stand for Nigeria. Okoye Aripo accused the European Union by that time, no, European Community by that time. You know, it was formerly European Economic Community, transformed into European Community, now European Union. When it was both EEC and EC, the foreign policy stand of Nigeria was that Africa must not be used as an instrument, as a source of raw materials for the development of Europe, because that was what the issue was.
Yeah,
right?
that would lead me now to my next question, because one of the things that Italy did say in its accusation of France was that France owes most its soaring economy to African countries, saying that particularly for African countries that use the CFA franc, saying that they are the ones actually booming, responsible for the booming France economy. Now, let's look at it in the light of economy now. And the Italian Prime Minister did say something about EU looking to decolonizing Africa. Do you share this opinion? And Africans must begin to now look at developing their own countries by their own self.
Yeah, this has been the debate over the years. Look, there's what we call Africa must be responsible for resolving Africa's problem. It was even an issue at the level of the African Union. You know, the issue is that at the end of the day, France was one of the early initiators of that particular argument, that Africa must be allowed to solve its own problems. But what are African problems? What do we mean by African problems? Which problems are created by Africans? Which are the problems created by the Europeans that we want Africans to solve? Now, when we talk about dependency syndrome, etc., when we talk about the CFA as a currency, we know the problems. Let me give you a typical example, as you have rightly pointed out in your own observation. There was the rivalry between the CEAO, Communauté économique de l'Afrique de l'Ouest, which is the francophone counterpart of the ECOWAS, Economic Community of West African States. The fundamental difference between the two, before the CEAO packed up, was that the CEAO was made up exclusively of French-speaking countries, while the ECOWAS was and is still made up of Anglophones, Francophones, and the Lusophones. All right? Now, the issue is that the existence of the French economic community in West Africa did not allow the good and effective takeoff of the ECOWAS. It was problematic. The problem is there. And even if you want to look at it continentally, for now, the Francophone factor is still an issue, especially from the perspective that Italy has raised it. For instance, the CFA franc. Now, we have the monetary union, which I think is supposed to be headquartered in either Mali or Cote d'Ivoire or whatever, the Cote d'Ivoire. They have been on this issue to have an ECO, that is the ECOWAS currency. They have been shifting right from 2002. And one major obstacle to that one has been the relationship between the ECO and the CFA. The CFA is a currency dealing specifically with the Francophones and France. So if you look at it from this perspective, this is an issue. Now Africa is also talking about integration in all its ramifications. it has what they call Agenda 2063. And the structure of this agenda is such that monetary relations also constitute an issue there. Now, how do you reconcile that? You have the South African rand, which is strong. You have the Nigerian naira, which is competing. And since Africa was partitioned into 5 regions to enable continental integration to be fast-tracked, now the ECU is the currency for West Africa. But it has not been able to find its fate. It cannot come out. We have just been limited to the issuance of a passport and the concept of a community citizen. It's not more than that. So in this case, your observation cannot be more correct. It's a major problem. Italy can be correct to that extent, but Italy is also a source of problem to Africa itself. All right? What's the relationship between Italy and Libya? How is Libya behaving within intra-African politics?
So let's.
All right? How many Nigerians have been deported from Libya, and yet they are talking about African integration?
So I would like to cut you short here and ask about the issue of returning migrants to Libya after failed attempts to Europe, despite the fact that it actually does contravene international law of returning a person to a place where they face persecution or torture. Now, what should is it that African countries cannot take independent action on their own? Except this happens when we just hear United Nations come to actually condemn these actions. Can African countries take actions on their own to ensure that the lives of their citizens are at least kept safe?
I like your question with a smile. You see, we started in 1963 by calling ourselves Organization of African Unity, meaning that the unity is not yet there. You are only organizing it. You are organizing a basis for it. Now, when in 1991, I think it's on June 3rd, the Abuja Treaty established what was called African Economic Community. All right, it's an Abuja Treaty. It was done here in Nigeria. It provided more foundations to the 1980 Lagos Plan of Action, thanks to the sagacious mind of Professor Adebayo Adedeji. Now, we talk about African Union. Where is the Union? What are the pillars? What are the foundations? Please, the Union doesn't have any basis. It doesn't have any good pillars. Why am I saying this? Is to enable me answer your question directly. Which country will want to act independently when their policy says they want to be speaking with one voice? And at the end of the day, it doesn't work that way. Let me tell you the Libyan policy on this matter so that you can see where I'm going to. During the time of Muammar Gaddafi wanted to be the president of Africa. He designed Nigeria. He placed Nigeria to be the Minister of Defense. South Africa to provide the Minister of Trade, Commerce, Business, all those things. This is the way he did that one. That was his own conception of African unity and speaking with one voice. But it couldn't work. Why? Because he viewed African unity from a myopic perspective and from a unilateralist approach, in which case Libya would be the leader of Africa. He even wanted the African capital, headquarters, to be moved from Addis Ababa, all right, to sit. Now, the issue is that in terms of immigration, people go through Libya, go through the desertic, very, very difficult area to go to the Mediterranean ports there to escape, especially through Morocco. But many people have been maltreated. Many people died. So I am trying to draw your attention to the problematic that on the one hand, African leaders are talking about integration. Integration means, please, you can freely travel from your place to another African country and then have the right of establishment and stay there, subject to fulfilling all administrative processes and having a good ID card. So integration on the one hand, but when people move there, you don't allow them to settle down. You make life difficult for them. And this is why migrants from Africa try to defy the African leaders themselves and try to risk. They make it do or die policy. So if you are now saying that, why can't an African country take independent decision? The answer will not be far-fetched. The environment is hostile to that. Look at how Nigerians are maltreated in many African countries. I might have
to cut you here, but from all you said, what I can deduce is I think Africa should just begin to do better and speak and talk with one voice to ensure that we find a solution to this crisis. Thank you very much for your time, Professor Bola Akinterinwa, a former Director General at the Nigerian Institute of International Affairs. Thank you very much. Yes, sir. All right. All right. Thank you very much for being a part of the program today. That's the much we can take. Till I see you again next time, I am Oyi Adekunle. Bye for now.